this is strange. Basically, it helps sync up all the cameras and the sound, so you have a point in time so that they like...
Right, okay.
Is that why they do that?
And welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast. Today I am joined by some real renewable energy trailblazers. We have Leah Robson, who is Managing Director of Your Energy Your Way, Georgia, a renewable energy trainee, and Abby, an electrical apprentice. And the reason that we're having this discussion today is because Your Energy Your Way have a 50-50 workforce, 50% men, 50% women. Now, to put that into perspective, in the renewable energy industry more broadly, it's around 80% men to 20% women. Automotive industry is pretty similar. But when it comes to trades, it's more like 97% men and 3% women. And today we're asking, why is that? Especially given the astronomical volume of work that needs to be done in order to reach net zero targets. In fact, we have to install 8 million heat pumps over the next decade, requiring an additional 27,000 technicians. And so not including women in this workforce seems kind of nonsensical. But before we get into it, I have 3 very quick things to tell you. First of all, my name is Imogen Bogle. I spend most of my time on the Fully Charged Show and the Everything Electric Show. And whilst I am obviously extremely biased, I do highly recommend you going to check out those once you've had a bit of an audio meander through the world of renewable energy in this podcast. Secondly, I have to tell you about our live shows. Next up, we are at the London Excel at the end of March, and it is an incredible festival of clean energy. You can come along, hear from some fantastic speakers, see, touch, try out, test drive a load of electric vehicles and clean energy technologies, and of course, speak to the experts, regardless of where you are on your own clean energy journey. And of course, we get to see you, the lovely audience, and find out what you want to hear about. And the third and final point is that we did experience a couple of audio challenges in recording this podcast, partly because a certain someone might have taken one of the microphones to Australia. So thank you for bearing with us on that one. Leah, Georgia, Abby, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast and coming into my kitchen. I understand that was probably a little bit of a weird request. Come to this random lady's kitchen in Oxfordshire. But I am so excited to get into this conversation. We're having this conversation just ahead of International Women's Day, so we have many things to get into. But first of all, Leah, paint the scene. So Your Energy Your Way, you install various PV, heat pumps, whole energy systems, storage, all in all sorts of different flavours. But the thing that we really want to know about is the training scheme that you've established to encourage more women into the profession. So can you tell us a little bit about what it is and what you've achieved so far?
So I've been in the industry for about 10 years and I was utterly depressed after a few years that when I was on a lot of building sites and in people's homes, there were really only ever women who were either the client, the architect, the interior designer or the cleaner. I don't think for the first 5 years I actually met any other female tradespeople. And so it kind of got me thinking, and I had the opportunity to start my own business. And I really wanted to do something to change that. And over time, it's kind of evolved. My ideas have kind of changed over time. But what we're doing now is we have 5 ladies who are working for us. We're training them in a few different ways. So we've got 2 ladies are doing apprenticeships and 3 were actually doing what we're calling a renewables traineeship. We can get maybe a bit more into the detail of that later. But there's a few things that we're doing that we think make it more accessible for women. So we're paying a living wage for the first thing, because a lot of women kind of come into this slightly later in life. So we think it's really important that they're able to have money to live on, as opposed to the standard apprenticeship wage is about £5.50 odd an hour. So it's not really very possible unless you're actually still living with family or you've got someone to support you. So yeah, and also we wanted to train a group of women together so that they can all support one another, because often you can feel a little bit isolated in this industry as kind of the only female. So yeah, those are a few of the...
Oh my gosh. Okay, I have so many questions. Not least, I didn't realise that £5.50 is the average.
Yeah, that's more or less the number. I don't know the exact number, but yeah, that's
Oh,
somewhere around that mark.
So, Georgie, I want to make sure I've got this right. You're doing an apprenticeship scheme.
The training scheme, yeah.
Trainee scheme. I got it totally wrong. You're doing the trainee scheme.
Yeah.
Abby, you're doing the apprenticeship scheme.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Georgie, you're doing the trainee scheme.
Yep.
Can you tell us what that means and what you do on it?
So basically it's like a old school style of an apprenticeship. So it's like a lot of hands-on work, a lot practical. We get to see like it from the design to the installation, like start to finish. So that's really good. And then we also get to do like the theory side of stuff. So we do that with Nathan at Beta Teach.
And that's all under the umbrella of renewable energy technology,
Yeah.
so solar panels, heat pumps, all that kind
Yeah,
of
and
thing.
we also learn like obviously the fundamentals of like plumbing and stuff. So yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so combination of being on site, doing things in the real world, and then also that theory side of understanding the mechanics of, how does the electrical system work, how does plumbing work, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Abby, you don't do the trainee scheme, you do a more traditional apprenticeship scheme to train to be an electrician. Tell us about that.
Yep. So I go to college 1 day a week. We do practical and theory, just like any other apprenticeship. And then the other 4 days a week, I'm working on site, learning from the electricians, and then just getting involved in all the other parts of the business, really.
And you came to this a little bit later on because you had your own business beforehand.
Yep.
Tell us about that, so what you were doing before and the transition into becoming an electrician.
Okay, so I started straight out of school. I went to college, did a carpentry apprenticeship, and then I had different jobs over the years. And then it finally came a time when I realised that people liked seeing me on site now. That I thought it was a positive, and other women would be like, "Oh, that's really cool." Whereas before, people didn't think I would be able to do it, so I didn't feel like I'd ever be able to get the work. So I decided to get my own, and then I met Leah and started subcontracting for Leah and doing repairs and remedial works after they'd done jobs. And then decided that I was getting a bit tired, my back was getting a bit, and I just said, "Oh, blimey, I wish I'd done electrics." And then Leah offered me an apprenticeship, offered me a job, so...
Leah appeared with a halo.
yeah, really big halo.
And so you've done 2 different apprenticeship schemes, but one you were, I'm guessing, about 17,
Yep.
and one some a little bit older than that. How's your experience of those 2 been different? And especially given that you've had, practical experience working for a while, has it been different? Have you approached them differently?
Yeah, it's massively different. I mean, it's easier this time around because I already had a huge understanding of building, and so that's easy for me. But for the social side, when I was 17, I found it a little bit difficult that I was the only girl. Like I sat and had lunch by myself for 3 or 4 years because all the guys would have lunch together and things like that. Now, although I still have lunch by myself, it's my choice. I'm happy to do that. I think now I don't worry that I'm doing something that's so different. I actually like it now. I feel empowered that I'm doing it again, rather than the first time around being more nervous or anxious about being there.
And it's always interesting, I think, to see what is just a consequence of being 17 and slightly socially awkward. I was looking at you, but I was talking about myself and that being socially awkward. And what is because you're in a male-dominated environment. And sometimes I have those moments where you think back to things that you said when you were 17 or 18 or even 28. Like, oh, God, it's so embarrassing. And the more time you spend working, the more comfortable with you are with the dynamics of a workplace. You're like, I'm not embarrassed about that thing anymore. But when you're having to think about those 2 things of what is my behaviour because I am just young and inexperienced, and what is because of the environment I'm in, that can be a tricky landscape to navigate. And it's so nice that now you're like, if I want lunch by myself, I'm going to do that because that is a nice thing to do. What is it that gets you up in the morning? Why is it that you enjoy being in this world? And Leah, I'll start with you.
It's a hugely satisfying job. There aren't many jobs, I don't think, where you can genuinely feel that you're making a real difference about climate change. I mean, you are literally taking fossil fuel gas boilers off the wall and replacing them with a technology that's, 400% cleaner. And it still feels like magic when you turn on a heat pump. I mean, I'm more in the office now, but I still remember, that feeling that you turn on the heat pump on a freezing cold day and suddenly you've got heat in the pipes behind the heat pump, and that the grid is getting more and more decarbonised, and so over time that heat pump is only going to get cleaner in terms of its CO2 impact, rather than a gas boiler, which will probably get less and less efficient as it gets older.
Because that's the thing, we find it on the channel that we speak about these slightly more abstract topics like, the future of wind power in the UK. And then we also talk about, well, how can people be empowered now and actually make decisions how they upgrade their homes or, that kind of thing. And actually you are so enabling them to make those decisions, which must be hugely rewarding.
Yeah, and it's great because I know the team do a fantastic job as well. So I know that our customers are getting the absolute maximum reduction in their CO2 impact that they can have. So yeah, it's hugely satisfying.
Do you give certificates where it's like, you were this bad and now you're an A-star?
That's the marketing. We need more marketing ideas. Yes, that's a very good plan.
That's what I would personally like. I think partly because I really like star charts. But anyway, Georgia, how about yourself? What makes you get up in the morning? What motivates you to be part of this sphere in this world?
I mean, I massively agree with Leah. I feel like that's the same reason as me, like seeing the customer happy at the end of the install and like being there start to finish. It's definitely like a nice feeling. And just working in like a positive environment, like with the people that I work with and stuff. I feel like, with the stereotypes and stuff, it could be quite toxic, but with this company, it's just nice. It's a equal balance of male, female. And I feel like that definitely helps.
I was talking to my dad the other day and we were talking about like what we enjoy about work, and there is something personally for me and how I'm motivated that you have a project, there is an outcome that you can point to and that you can wrap it up and be like, we did that and we can be really proud of it. And I guess that's sort of kind of what you've described, that sort of start to finish process, wrapping it up, being like, yeah, that was good.
And learning every day. I learn something new every day.
And I don't know if you have this, but I found that learning at school, you're always doing it for an exam, really. And then when you learn at work, it feels like it's more, well, it's your choice and it's for the joy of getting better. And it feels different.
Yeah, I'm working in a career that I want to progress in. So learning every day is definitely something really valuable. Yeah.
And Abby, how about yourself?
So I've always obviously been in the construction industry, but I really like working outside. I really like doing all the renewable bits because I'm never doing anything that I'm not proud of or happy about. I know it's going to be better for the planet. I know that when we do solar, people are going to save money. What we do, I get job satisfaction because of how it looks, because of knowing that we've fitted it well. And also I think when you're working on site and you're in that environment when there's lots of men, I find it really empowering being with the other women on site, us getting the job done really good, and we're just like, yes, ladies, yes.
Look at us go.
Yeah.
And so, Leah, you obviously had this ambition that you wanted to create a world that was, to create a company that was more inclusive, had a better community of women to actually show this is an opportunity for women, can be a career for women. And one of the things that I noticed on your website is that actually Your Energy Your Way is set up as a community interest company. Was that the most straightforward route to enable that? What's the sort of benefit of that kind of structure?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think if we set up now, we'd probably set up as a B Corp, but that wasn't really a thing that was around 6 years ago when we set up. Essentially, we wanted some sort of structure that signaled to people that we were a social enterprise. So we have a limit on how much profit we can take out of the business to really just kind of keep us focused on the fact that pretty much every time we make a little bit of money, it goes into employing more people and making sure we're training more people. So yeah, so that was the reason behind the community interest company to be a social enterprise.
Which, I mean, is so critically important. I mean, there's various different statistics that you can read, but there's we're short 27,000 technical people in order to install all of this green stuff. It's a phenomenal challenge, and we need people to be invested in training and bringing more people into the workforce.
Yeah, and I think the reason that George is doing a traineeship, not an apprenticeship, is there isn't actually an apprenticeship at the moment that you can do that is in heat pumps. So we have another trainee as well who's doing a heating and plumbing apprenticeship, and she has to do a gas boiler certificate, and we have to find gas boilers for her to install so that she can kind of qualify for that bit of her course. And she has to go and fit bathrooms, and that's not stuff that we do. So there is a new apprenticeship that's kind of on its way out, but it's not there yet. It's called the Low Carbon Heating Apprenticeship, and we're really keen that these guys transition onto it at some point in the future. But right now, nothing you can do that will really train you to go and fit these technologies, and particularly not the breadth of stuff that we do.
Absolutely phenomenal. I had no idea that was the case. So currently no formal apprenticeship scheme that exists that captures all of the renewable technologies that you need for your home. So you've crafted your own one, essentially.
Yeah, essentially that's what we're doing, because we do everything from roofing, electrical, plumbing, all the design work. Yeah, there's just so much. There's kind of quite a bit of IT stuff, setting things up, connecting things to the network. There's lots and lots of different aspects to a renewables job, and I think traditionally the trades have been very siloed. So you become an electrician, you become a plumber. It's all very separate. A lot of electricians don't even know how to install heating controls, for example, which kind of feels electrical, but yeah, it's all very boxed off.
That is definitely something I want to come back to in a moment, because this is the overwhelmingly phenomenal thing about the transition that we're in, is that it's not like, oh, buy a boiler, install it, never think about it, walk away. All of these things have to come together in this like incredible choreography of technology, and it requires a way more holistic approach to all of those. But we'll get onto that in a second. But Georgia, I want to ask, what made you think that this was going to be a career for you, and what attracted you to this in the first place?
Well, during lockdown, I went out a lot with my mum's boyfriend because he has a lot of rental properties, and I was just doing stuff like painting the walls, stripping them, all the wallpaper, stuff like that. And then I always had a idea in the back of my head that I wanted to learn a trade anyways, because I was just like, when are people not going to need electricians or plumbers? And then I saw the job advert for Your Energy Your Way and how much they were advocating for women to get involved. And yeah, I feel like that probably sparked my interest even more, knowing that they were so keen because of all the stereotypes and stuff around, women being in trades and men and stuff. But yeah.
The job security thing is so interesting, because I think safe to say that electrician and plumbers are going to be the last people replaced by robots. And actually, I did look this up in preparation for this. And we've got 28 million dwellings in the UK, of which just 4.1% have solar. So we've got 26.9 million to go. A lot of work to do. No fear of losing jobs there, I don't think. Abby, how about yourself? You mentioned earlier on that you felt maybe going to walk down the electrician route would be slightly easier on your back. Have you found that to be the case?
Yeah, well, firstly, obviously I'm working in a team now, so there's a lot more health and safety, and it's a lighter load because the solar panels really aren't too heavy, but we've got the scaffolding. But, when I was doing just the carpentry just by myself, it was quite a bit heavier. But a lot's changed since I first started my apprenticeship anyway, because when I started when I was 17, we didn't really have... It was basically, if you can't lift that sheet of MDF, then you've not got a job. Whereas now, I'd be told off for lifting a sheet of MDF by myself in a company. So a lot's changed, a lot easier for women to get into the industry.
And I guess it's sort of, don't be a martyr or sort of like have that macho feeling of, if you can't lift the MDF, it's like, actually, well, that's just fundamentally perhaps not a very safe thing to do.
Yeah, and we all know now it just does your back in. It's not any good for anyone.
Yeah. I took a door off some hinges the other day, and I was like, wow, a door, when you open and close, it's not very heavy, obviously. I took it off, I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going to die. So as we mentioned, we're having this conversation ahead of International Women's Day. And this year the theme is #InspireInclusion. And the interesting thing is that, weirdly and rightly or wrongly, when you mention International Women's Day, it can get people's backs up. normally you get the comment of, what about International Men's Day? But what we're really saying is that International Women's Day is around advocating for equal opportunities for all people across education, social opportunities, political opportunities, all of that stuff. Basically, equal human rights. It's not rocket science. And key to that, and particularly key to the discussion that we're having today, is this idea of creating inclusivity to enable equal participation in various workforces. And ultimately, the aim of that is improving diversity, which we know unequivocally leads to better performing teams. And the analogy that I was thinking about in sort of preparation for this was, imagine if you had a completely homogenous football team made entirely of centre forwards, you'd have a few problems. So we know that diversity is extremely, extremely important. But when it comes to trades, there is a huge perception challenge. It's perceived as a place that is sort of a job for men, that it's about lifting heavy things like MDF boards or what have you. So I wanted to sort of get into your own personal experiences, particularly Leah, yourself, you've been in this industry for 10 years. You guys are slightly newer to it, but what are some of the assumptions perhaps that people have made and some of the interesting experiences you've maybe had?
It's being mistaken for the client quite often. So I remember being in a house where I was setting up and commissioning the heating system at the same time as the single male client was moving into the house. And I was asked about 5 times by the removal people, where do you want this, love? As in, where should we put the sofa? Where should we, whatever. I'm like, I'm not the client, I'm setting up. And I was standing there, pressing buttons on the heating system, but it was assumed that I was the customer.
How about you guys? Have you had any interesting assumptions that people have made, perhaps?
I think the main assumption is that you're just not going to be that good. That you're just sort of going to be a hindrance more than anything, I think. But you get that moment where you think, well, okay, 5 minutes, and they're going to see clearly that they don't need to talk to me like that, or they don't need to explain that to me.
And is that sort of doubt in your expertise? Are they thinking that from you're not going to be able to lift the heavy thing? Or is it that, more core in terms of, you couldn't possibly know about voltage? What do you think
I just don't think they're used to seeing the women on site as much. I don't think it's anything against the guys. I just think that they're a bit shocked, and they're just used to being surrounded by other guys. It's just, that's the industry. It's always been male-dominated.
So I used to be an engineer, and again, it was sort of, pretty male-dominated, and had similar experiences where people would assume that you work in HR or in design, and when you say, oh, I'm an engineer, they're like, what? And you can see the processing, like, and even now I found it on various media trips that we get invited to, where everyone in that media group are journalists talking about automotive. So we are all there for the same reason. And then I've had instances where a male counterpart sat next to me and been like, so with a car, you basically have this battery and this, and I'm like, yeah, we do the same job. yeah, I understand. So how is it, has it changed for you in the sort of past 10 years? Do you see a sort of shift in attitudes?
I think the whole Me Too thing had just brought this kind of stuff up to the surface, so people were just a little bit more aware. And I don't want to get into the way of like just bashing the guys on site, because I think 99% of the people that we come across and work with, they're actually genuinely really pleased to see women on site. And so I think maybe that has changed a bit recently, but I think there are a lot of men who don't like that horrible sort of toxic macho atmosphere that you can get on site. And so to have women there can often just give them permission to not have to behave in that way. So I think, working in a mixed group is not without its challenges, but I think sometimes there is like actually, this is easier for me to say, I can't lift that because I'm sort of working with this lady who was also happy to admit that she can't lift it. Let's do it together, kind of thing. So I think, it is changing, and there's definitely a real willingness to make it work. And people realise that sometimes they have preconceptions and quite quick to apologise for them.
That's absolutely, I think, nail on the head, and sort of sums up the discussion that when there is a mixed team that is diverse, actually it's better for everyone in that team. And I think you're right as well, that it's not sort of, oh God, men are terrible. That's not what it is at all. It's always sort of that going up against that surprise that people have. And then it's really nice when it's, people realise that their assumptions were maybe misplaced, and then, working towards that really lovely, nice functioning team. But are there any things that you feel legitimately limited by? Like there, a heat pump, for example, is a big unit. That is a heavy thing. Obviously, you're probably not on site on your own, but are there things that genuinely you have found more challenging than some of your colleagues, male or female?
We always work as a team, so if there's anything that like we struggle with, then like we always have someone to help, and we're empowering each other anyway. So yeah, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. Like lifting that heat pump, me and you did that with a couple other people. That was fine.
Yeah, I think lifting is the biggest challenge, because heat pumps are big and heavy, and sometimes we're installing quite big radiators. It's made us think as a company about how can we do that in a way that's safe for everybody. I think the trickiest thing is not to make sure that we end up with the men ending up doing the lifting and the ladies worrying about their backs. We've got to manage that, because it's really important that they don't damage their backs.
Now, we've kind of alluded to this a little bit already. This idea that, again, it's not just plonk in a bit of hardware, press go, off you go, but actually there's a whole suite of stuff coming together. You might have solar panels on the roof, you might have a home energy battery, you might have smart appliances, you might be controlling all of those with a really lovely bit of sophisticated app or software or whatever. And what that means is that actually, I'm guessing in your roles, you have to have this really complete understanding of how people live their lives. When do they need hot water? How do they use the different space in their home? Are they intimidated by technology? All of those sorts of different things. So I'm guessing, in the past, especially 10 years perhaps, that kind of how you think in that really complete way has had to change. And I wonder if that changes the attractiveness of trades in general, and if that's something that perhaps you've noticed.
Yeah, I think if we want to deal in stereotypes, more often women are socialised, or whether it comes naturally, let's not get into that debate, but women are more often used to being communicators and caring and sort of working together cooperatively. That's kind of how we're encouraged to be, and those things lend themselves absolutely brilliantly to this job, because we have to be able to get on customers' wavelength, and some customers will want to know intimately how the whole thing works, and they want to be able to press buttons and check the app and do all sorts of clever stuff. Other customers just want you to fit it and then them to be able to forget about it. And so we need to make sure that we're giving customers the right level of explanation, that we're designing the systems for the right, for their needs. And I think those are skills that women often, not always, but often bring to the party more. And also on site, being able to work together. You were saying about being in a team. That's really key.
And it's so hard to talk about these things without going into big sweeping stereotypes, generalizations, and there is so much sort of anecdote that exists in it. But there is something to be said where it's not just about changing perceptions of women on site, but actually how female customers feel like tradespeople perception of them. And I know that's something that I've definitely experienced, that we've had, I am so boring. We've had endless issues with the roof and, had loads of quotes. And I do get a little bit patronised and have to kind of, work quite hard to stand my ground a little bit. And I think the more women that there are in this industry more generally, actually some of those things probably also start to disappear. There's still so much to do. Your organisation is 50-50, but I think generally it's something like 97% male, 3% women. So there is still so much work to do. What do you think can be done? How can we accelerate this process?
I think we need a modern day apprenticeship that is fit for purpose, because there are too many limiting things about the current way that apprenticeships are done. So there's the low wage that we alluded to before. There's the difficulty in getting yourself sort of somebody to apprentice you, particularly if you don't fit the typical mould of a young white lad. And, let's face it, ethnicity is also an issue in this industry, and not one that we've managed to address, but we really want to. It's very much a white profession as well, which is, not as it should be at all. So yeah, we need to change the current apprenticeship model, because it's too hard for people who don't fit the normal mould to get work experience, to get somebody to take them on. So we need to think of different ways to do that. Is it pools of apprenticeships? Is it people who kind of get together to take apprentices on between them? Can we find a way to pay apprentices a decent wage? Can we get rid of the current rule, which is really restrictive, which is that I can't put an apprentice on the hook at all for any of their training costs? That would be illegal. So I have to sign a thing for Abby's college to say that she will not be ever charged for any of the money that I've put into her training. Mm-hmm. Now, I can see how that worked maybe 50 years ago when there was kind of strong culture of loyalty. People don't necessarily work in that way now. There's every chance that you train someone up for 4 years and then they say thank you very much and off they go and start their own business. Is there some way of like changing that really, so that, you know, if you want to be an accountant, you go on a training contract and you train with a company for a couple of years and they put you through your accountancy exams. That's very much done in other industries. It's not the way it works in the trade. So that feels like something that could be changed as well. And I think just getting more visibility of women who are already doing these jobs, because, you know, they are not seen enough, and, you know, they can tell a really good story.
Georgia, I want to ask a couple of questions in your direction, because on the show we talk about how does a heat pump work, or what is the most amazing thing in solar panel technology and all this sort of stuff. But I don't think we actually know or really appreciate, what does a day look like for you? What does a kind of typical day on site look like for you? Walk us through it.
Well, it can range from doing like the PV or heat pump surveys to doing the design on the software, and then the actual installation. So every day is different, like whether it's, you know, being out on the roof, like we had to work in the snow for a couple of weeks at the start of the year, or doing heat pumps with a few of the other trainees and a couple of the engineers and stuff. But yeah, it all varies, but I feel like that's what's so good about it as well, is because every day is different, not like doing the same thing. So I think that's why I enjoy it so much, and I'm sure that's the same for you and the other trainees as well.
I really can empathise with the fact that every day is different and how important that is. The idea for me personally of going to the same place to do the same thing every day makes me feel anxious, and there is something so joyful in seeing these seeing different types of property, go to different parts of, you know, your area, all that kind of thing. Is there a particular bit that you're like, I absolutely love this particular sector or field or skill?
I just like working with the people that I work with. Like, it's always really nice working with like Abby and like the other trainees and stuff. Like, it's always a laugh. So I think it definitely makes a difference working with like great people, and like being out on the roof. I think doing the solar panels, that is a lot of fun, and I'm excited for summer. So.
This thing, your tan is going to be
nicer,
glorious. This is so pathetic, and I'm actually very ashamed to admit this. One of the things that I think would put me off personally is being cold. Do you get cold?
Yeah, well, I feel like you eventually do warm up the more you move around and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm really sensitive to the cold, so I'll come in with like 6 layers on, and Abby's got like a hoodie on.
Well, you were wearing your North Face puffer today. You were wearing just... Yep. I don't think you were even wearing a jumper, so
no.
Case in point. The other thing that I think is a weird insight into different people's worlds is what's the very specific and quite niche banter that you have within a team. So, for example, here at Fully Charged, we... you know, it's laughing at, oh, how did the sync clap go? Or, oh my God, he shot an S-log, which is a particular way of shooting. Or travel lodges versus holiday inns when we're doing those sorts of shoots. So that's our kind of a window into our world. What's the sort of typical chat that you'd be having on site? Or is it safe for the podcast? That's the other question.
Probably
food. You lot talk about food all the time.
Oh yeah, we cook stuff for each other. Yeah. We try each other's food all the time.
Yeah, sometimes you're bringing lunch for me.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I made a curry. Abby made a millionaire shortbread.
I had to promise I'd take them out for lunch after this. It's like, will there be lunch? I'm like, no, Imogen promised biscuits, but she didn't mention lunch. I'll take you for lunch.
Oh, so I have you ever watched Ted Lasso?
I keep hearing about it.
Oh.
I need to watch it.
It's so good. But one of my favourite bit that I took from it was that the two coaches, they had secret sandwich and they would make each other a sandwich. And I've tried to steal that in my own personal life, that, secret sandwich with someone. It's great.
Yeah.
We have one of our team who's called Ham Sandwich Kev, isn't he? Cheese and ham Kev, because he always has the same sandwich every day.
Ham sandwich Kev, that is the best thing. I feel like it's quite an insult. You could say, "Oh, you're such a ham sandwich Kev."
Yeah. Cheese and ham Kev.
Okay, so you mentioned that you just like being efficient, getting the job done, have a nice time on site. You painted a really wonderful picture. It sounds like a really nice place to be, especially if it can be warm and on the roof.
Yeah, it's too hot in the summer though, you know that, because you're always in the sun when you're fitting solar panels. Did you not work that out yet?
Focusing on my tan.
No, the winter's not that bad, because you look forward to having a nice cup of coffee, get in your van, put the heating on. It's all right.
Are there any, if you could sort of wave your magic wand and you go over to a client's house and you're hoping for a specific type of tea, a specific kind of snack, what's the dream scenario? What are you like, oh, thank God we came to this house?
Some customers make cakes for you, don't they? I feel like you've had cakes made. Definitely.
I'm not sure if I've got a customer for my business before, an elderly couple. They make me lunch every time I go, and they tell me what I'm going to have. They tell me what they're going to cook me. They're just the best. I think anyone that wants to feed you, wants to give you water and a warm drink, understanding that when it's cold out that you're cold, not that they don't care that you're doing the job for them.
That is it's not a tall ask, is it? Warm drinks, toilets. I think people should be able to manage both of those things.
Yeah, you would be surprised sometimes.
The majority do, but
the majority do, but some people just don't think. And you think you want these guys to do a good job on your house, so look after them.
Yeah. Otherwise, take out one of the solar panels.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to limit your kilowatts here.
Totally.
Okay, we are getting towards the end, but I guess my last question for you is, what should I have asked you today? What are you thinking? God, you're stupid for not asking that question. If you say nothing, I've done my job correctly. Or any other last thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience?
I think it's interesting to think about, where do we look for people who might want to get into this industry who don't necessarily, like you were saying, don't necessarily think about it. So we thought about, when we were advertising the traineeship, can we advertise at like climbing walls and bike shops and, on rambling magazines, and people who kind of like to be, we talked about being outdoors. How can we find those women and people who don't necessarily think of this as a job, who kind of already care about the climate and are happy to be cold every now and then and happy to do like something that's practical? So I think sometimes employers just need to think a bit more widely because if you always advertise in the places you always advertise, especially with algorithms on social media and whatever, your adverts will be seen by the same kind of people that you already have. So just think a little bit creatively about what you put on your adverts. Put some women on your adverts. Put women who don't look like models, because that just makes other women feel intimidated, and they don't really look like they actually belong on a roof.
You can't put me on one then.
Well, I mean, no, because you also. I was putting me on them, really. That just fits the bill fine. So put women that look like ordinary women, and think about where you're advertising, and I think you'll be surprised at the people you get applying for your jobs.
Please support our Stop Burning Stuff Patreon and help us to tackle misinformation about electric vehicles and clean energy. Thank you so much for joining us today. That is sadly all that we have time for. Leah, Georgia, Abby, thank you so much for giving up your morning. I personally feel honestly uplifted about where we're headed. I think we've established that there is so much to be said for showing that this is a career that's possible, for encouraging people into this industry. And if any of the listeners have children who could be interested, or you yourself are interested, then please take a look at the show notes, because all of the information about Your Energy Your Way will be in there. So thank you, lovely listeners, for joining us. one tiny little request. If you could like, comment, subscribe, or all of the above to this episode, then please do. It really, really helps us and ensures that we can carry on spreading the interesting and positive stuff from across the clean energy transition. So that's it. If you have been, thank you very much for listening.